Om Saram to our listeners. Welcome to Saturday News number 839. So I am Gulab Moria and I offer my most loving and humble pranams at the lotus feet of our beloved Bhagavan, Sri Sathya Sai Baba. So last week we were hearing on the discussions among mental health professionals for Sai Society. So today we'll continue on that. So this is part 2 and we'll be starting with the power of listening. So let's get straight into it.
I just wanted to say about what Suzanne was saying, in the beginning there, she was talking about this moment, there's a lot to be learned. There's that great line that says, never let a good crisis go to waste. This is a chance for changes. The world changes, but more importantly, closer to home, changes in ourselves. So the power of listening. You've probably heard about this before and have all experienced it to some extent or other. This is a very major issue for professionals in the field, but it's a major issue for all of us, actually. So you know that Swami says that there's great importance in even small things that we do. And psychology also notices that the power of the small. So for instance, if you give a smile to someone, if you give a kind word, if you give an honest compliment, these are very powerful things, very powerful within therapy, but very powerful outside too. And this is something that we can do to really transform this world. I mean, it sounds ridiculously simple, but it's when you see it in action, it's really quite extraordinary. So even bigger than those items that I just mentioned is the power of listening. So this is a basic pillar of treatment in mental health field. And it's also a basic pillar for what you can do to serve other people. And so what it means is that giving a listening ear, it's usually the strongest factor in success in counseling. Sometimes it's be called being present for the other person. So this is something that we often hear talk about. And Swami would say, he said, I believe to Sandweiss, but also to a number of other mental health professionals, say first understanding, then share, meaning listen closely to what the person that comes to you has to say. Listen closely until you feel that you understand them and that they feel that you understand them. And that's a very, very freeing and very powerful thing. So some people have also even pointed out that understanding can be synonymous with love. If you really understand another person, then the love tends to flow much more freely. So it's usually, we say, people become estranged or there's misunderstanding or they don't understand them or whatever. My 5-year-old granddaughter called me and recently, and she said, Grandpa Smurf, my parents don't understand me. So anyway, in this world, people feel that they're not understood. And for us to give that listening ear is a very, very powerful and helpful thing. So what gets in the way of a deep listening? Some of the things are obvious. Our mind tends to wander. And people can see that, like, so what about this? What about that? And also another factor is that we're trying to cook up our reply while they're talking. We're trying to make our next statement really be a great one. So we kind of miss what they're telling us. But someone else had listed a levels of listening that I think might be useful. So the lowest level is ignoring and tuning out. So this is obviously not so helpful and people can tell. Next level would be at least pretending to listen. You're at least being polite enough to pretend to listen. And then beyond that is selective listening. That means that you're at least tuning into certain things. You're sort of scanning, is this next subject possibly of interest to me? You're saying, okay, some of what you might say might be of interest to me and I might listen. Going beyond that is being attentive. That means you're there, you're listening, you're trying to hear it. Then going beyond that is being empathetic. That means you're listening with your heart. You're trying to see what it is that they're trying to tell you, and being open to it and being in some way welcoming of what they have to say. So a lot of this is taken from a type of therapy from the 50s and 60s called client-centered therapy. Carl Rogers is the figure usually associated with that. And some of the things that he had to say and that he taught are very, very compatible, again, I think, with the spiritual path and with the Sai path. And one of them is that in previous therapies, there had been a lot of idea that, this is people needed so much help that you were sort of lifting them up out of the ooze, and that they were helpless really to help themselves. And Rogers felt that people had a vast resource that leads them to self-understanding. And really, you just have to give them the time and the space and the love, and that tends to unfold, or at least move faster. Their spiritual evolution moves faster than it otherwise would. So his basic concept, and this is one that's still very powerful in the field today, is called unconditional positive regard. And it means that a therapist or a mental health helper should try and provide a situation where they're giving unconditional positive regard. Now, this is kind of revolutionary. This is kind of the essence of spirituality, I think. So obviously, we can't love everything about the person. In other words, they used to say, love the sinner, but hate the sin. There might be things that we don't particularly like about another person, but loving them as part of God, or loving their being, is very, very helpful. It really makes that person sort of unfold and blossom. And so I think I will leave it at that point.
Thank you, Dr. Phil. It's really nice to know that even the little day-to-day acts of listening that we do, they do make a difference. We'll now turn it over to Dr. Jack to deepen our understanding with a little bit of psychology education to help us understand how we can care for ourselves.
Thanks, Robbie. In addition to the, adjust my screen, in addition to this major pandemic, the COVID-19, there's many factors contribute to stress and negative moods. For example, they could include heredity. Sometimes we inherit a tendency towards being stressed, or maybe even towards depression. It could be physiological imbalances of the brain. The chemistry is a little off, or it could be certainly when we're hyper for a long time or under a lot of stress, the adrenaline does a lot of things to our body. It could be childhood deprivation. It could be just the cumulative effects of stress, maybe on our job, and then and the family, et cetera, and they all work to bring about an onset of these reactions in the body, the mind, the emotions, and our behavior. So if the causes of stress and depression are varied, then it makes sense that the treatments need to be varied also. So what we're doing is promoting a comprehensive approach in treating ourselves for the stress and the negative moods that we're having. Let me talk first of all about the physical realm, some physical self-treatment. Certain breathing exercises are very beneficial. Certain, what's called a progressive muscle relaxation exercise can be very, very beneficial. And you can easily find those because they're you can look at on our satyasai.usa on the national website. In fact, it's called the SAI protocol, or Stress Alleviation Intervention Protocol. And it spells out how exactly to do these breathing exercises, are these in the traditional breathing, stress reducing exercises, and muscle relaxation exercises. Actually, several years ago, I was with another psychologist and some medical people from the States and from the UK and from Manila. we were in the Philippines. It was in response to that horrible typhoon that hit late 2013. We got there early 2014 and had several medical camps over every day, sometimes 2 medical camps over a course of 2 weeks. And then we left, and about a week or 2 weeks later, another group of volunteers came to set up medical camps. But the question was, what can I do as a psychologist? Because the physicians are working with people, sometimes prescribing medication. We brought a lot of medications. So we started doing the Sai Protocol, and it gave them a tool. It's because a lot of the people were in post-traumatic stress because they lost their loved ones, they lost their homes, and I could see they held on to these things, and I hope they continue to practice. But they're easy to do. In fact, some of the young adults from Manila were our translators at times, and I was teaching a small group of people, one after another, these exercises, and then they translate. And finally, they came up to me, young woman, young man, and said, "We've listened to it and translated so much, we could do it. You could take a break." And I took a break, and they did a beautiful job. So it's very easy to do, and it's very, very effective. Some other physical self-treatments are some regular aerobic exercise. Suzanne talked about that fight-flight response that we build up. Well, physical exercise is just a beautiful way to release all that stuff that's built up. Certainly what we eat, a balanced diet, a healthier meals. If you're skipping breakfast, if you're doing too much sugar, if you're not eating enough, it's going to have an effect on your body, and it's not going to be able to take care of some of the physical stress reactions you have. Now, let me talk about the emotional self-treatment. It's important to recognize your feelings. And I'll let you know up front what I've seen over the years of working with people in my clinical office. Women are much better at recognizing and becoming aware of what they're feeling than men. Women have a richer vocabulary. They can talk about feelings. Men talk about, my muscles hurt, I worked out yesterday, or men can more easily talk about, I feel angry. They don't say they're angry, they express it. Men can learn from women how to recognize their feelings. And once you identify your feelings, and I'm gonna give you a hint of how to identify feelings. Because if you ever Google words that describe emotions, you're gonna get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Now, you may not use these words in vocabulary, but you'll know what every word means because every word describes a feeling. And I'm gonna give you a hint how to force fit all of these words describing feelings into 4 categories. And the words for those 4 categories, you're gonna remember because 3 words rhyme and they all end in the word D, with the letter D. Mad, sad, glad, and scared. So if you're not quite sure how you feel, ask, am I mad? Am I sad? Am I glad? Am I scared? At least you're identifying. And then the next step, which is critical, once you know and identify what you're feeling, it's important to share those feelings with somebody. And it's going to be important. You're not going to share those feelings to somebody who doesn't listen well. And Phil just talked a bit about how important listening is. So, and if you're the listener and you're helping somebody, urge that person to tell me what you're feeling. Tell me how you're feeling. Let me talk about some mental self-treatments. A lot of us, most of us, we've got this voice in our head, which is not who we are, but this is the voice in our head, and it's going all the time. And if we could listen to this voice, especially during times of stress or depression, this voice is very negative. I'm no good, I'm worthless, I'm this, I'm that. And it's important to be aware of this cognitive conversation, this cognitive self-talk, and minimize the self-criticism and at least try to balance it with some affirmations and saying, well, I'm a good person, I'm trying hard. So that's really important. You can also, there's a great book that I've actually told people in my clinical practice and in my industrial organizational consulting practice. I recommend this to pick up. It's called Feeling Good. It's written by a psychiatrist, David Burns. And I tell them, just read chapter 3 and 4 because they're gonna like it, and they'll probably read the rest of the book because it's a wonderful book. But it talks about a technique and exercise to understand my thoughts frequently cause my feelings. And a lot of these thoughts are irrational. Doesn't mean I'm crazy, but I have irrational thoughts. And there's ways to turn it into something rational. But it's really a good book, and I've used this in my clinical practice for a long time. It's important to catch the mistaken beliefs you have about yourself and about the world. Remember, I grew up Catholic, and the nuns taught me, and the priest taught me that I am a child of God. And as I entered into other areas of learning about spirituality and philosophy and Sai organization, I learned not only am I a child of God, I come from a divine heritage. So that divinity is in me. So sometimes I forget, and I think I'm something other than this divine, this child of God with this divinity in me. And it's important to remember that. And it's a mental way to treat yourself. It's also important when you're going through a difficult period, especially in the last 8 weeks, remember other people are stressed out too. You might feel alone. It's just me, it's not just you. I feel it. Phyllis and Suzanne, Ravi feel it. We all feel it. And we really are in this all together. Let me mention a few things about behavioral self-treatments. Now, it's important to catch your habits, be aware of the habits. Some of our habits are positive and constructive, and some of them are negative and destructive. And you can, with a little, when you pay attention and listen to yourself, you can catch your habits, and if you identify them, and you can change them. We can change habits. We're not prisoners of our habits. Better nutrition is a behavioral self-treatment. Talking to other people. It's really, Suzanne and Phil both talked about the importance of listening and talking, sharing this out. That's so important. Exercise regularly is so important. It's a behavior. Stay busy. I know the Catholic nuns used to tell us when we were kids, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. Well, as I grew up, I don't know so much about the devil, but I know an idle mind can get me in trouble. So stay busy, but get enough rest, because most people in this country, based on the sleep researchers I've read, will tell us we don't get enough sleep. Majority don't get enough sleep. We need 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night. And so many people get less than that. So many of us are walking around sleep deprived. Keeping a journal is important. Sometimes if you don't have somebody to talk to, or you just want to talk to yourself, you start writing down, keep a journal that you show nobody. That's just between you and yourself, and that can be really helpful. Remember, this disease is contagious. So disease is contagious, but at the same time, health is contagious. You do one constructive, positive thing, your mind, your body, your emotions, and it has a positive effect. Okay. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Jack. It's really nice knowing all the different ways that we can advocate and care for ourselves. And continuing on this theme, I know, Dr. Jack, you touched on understanding how we're feeling. And Suzanne, I'd like you to say a little bit more about understanding and managing our emotions at a time like this.
So I've been thinking about what would be useful, and not just repeating some things that have already been said really, really clearly. And, one thing is that in my experience, people oftentimes have a really hard time knowing what they're feeling emotionally. They can tell you what they think. They can tell you that if they don't feel good or if they feel fine, but to really be able to identify and be with an emotional experience is oftentimes not that easy. I mean, we obviously like positive emotions. We like pleasurable feeling. We like it when we feel calm, when we're in good company. And we don't like it when we're angry or anxious or frightened. That's just that's just kind of human nature. Where we get into trouble, I think, is when our preferences for feeling one way or another get in our way. And I'll let me try to say this clearly. If I don't approve of, for whatever reason, I don't approve of being angry, or I don't approve of being scared, my thinking about that is that makes me a non-spiritual person, or it makes me a selfish person. The tendency is to want to ignore that feeling, to try to make it go away. And it is actually counterproductive in my experience. What happens when we try to, let's say our feelings are hurt, or we feel angry about something, and we try to push that away, it leaks out of us. It will come out in eating too much. It'll come out in snapping at people. It will come out in some physiological symptom. So what I'd like to focus on is how to, another way to approach our emotional states. And that is a way to accept them without trying to change them, but just to be present and experience them. And in order to do that, we have to get comfortable with this physical instrument we have, with our physical body. So often when I ask somebody what they're feeling and they say, well, I'm feeling like that person said something bad to me. What I will do, and I'm going to suggest you do this, try this for yourself, is, so how are you experiencing that in your body right now? And people will have varying success. You'll have varying success with being able to answer that question. But what you want to do is look for the sensation of that. Does it manifest in a tight jaw? Does it manifest in a gripping in your midsection? Does it manifest in butterflies in your stomach? And oftentimes that's as far as we want to go. But then what I would say is then take the next step. So pay attention to that. It's just sensation. It's sensation with some preferences attached. That's a painful sensation. I don't want to have it. Or it's a scary sensation, and I don't want to think about it. But if we just pay attention to the sensation that's being caused by that emotional response, that kind of amazing thing can happen, which is that it will, to the extent that we can experience that sensation without pushing it away or without clamping down on it. I think of it as holding it in the flame of awareness, that we're just aware of it. It begins to change. And it can begin to change in the direction of becoming more intense. And we can feel, but it can increase our awareness about, okay, what is my reaction about? Or it can change in the direction of loosening up and beginning to dissipate. The goal isn't to particularly make one feeling or another go away, one emotional response or another go away. But the goal is to get back in the flow so that we have access to, our hearts can start to open. It's sort of like being, if I don't know if you can relate to this, but if you think about a 2-year-old who's really angry, right? And that 2-year-old is stomping his or her feet, and you say, be quiet. What that 2-year-old learns is they learn to close down, and they learn that it's bad to feel that way. If you say, I see you really angry, very often what you'll see that they do is they kind of soften, and then the anger passes. So this is just a way that I think we have always with us to manage emotions that could otherwise become overwhelming and, as it were, sink our ship. Basically, it's experiencing what is without judgment, is how we develop the ability to stay in equanimity. It's like building new muscles, new capacities, till we get to the point where we are not so much at the effect of the internal and external rough waters. I think that's all I want to say about that.
Thank you, Suzanne. Those are wise words on how we can advocate for ourselves and care for ourselves by embracing our emotions and understanding them rather than fighting them. And so we're going to kind of close this theme of caring and advocating for ourselves, and we're going to move on to the next theme. By the way, we've got 3 more segments, 3 little mini segments left. I realize we're almost up on the hour. We're going to keep going, and so we'll probably take another 15 minutes or so to conclude the session. Each of the panelists will speak for one more time. We're now going to move into the territory of when we can't necessarily care or advocate for ourselves. And where I first want to go with this is Dr. Phil talking about how the role of sadhana, spiritual practice, and how that interacts with, or basically giving someone advice of doing sadhana to overcome feelings of low mood or negativity.